come in. Well, good evening, and a nice little chat between Rich Pagano, our host, and board member Senator John Kane. I enjoyed hearing your little chat. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to everybody else who's out there who's joining us tonight. And a huge thank you to all those that have served and those that continue to serve for our country. And we thank them today on this Veterans Day 2021. I'm Lori Grant, the Executive Director of Delaware County Historical Society, and I'm here with Paul Hughes, who is our Outreach Associate, and Rich Pagano, who is representing the Sports Legends of Delaware County Museum. Rich is actually our main host tonight. He is the lead for this program, and we thank him and the Sports Museum for this collaboration. Before we get into the actual sports talk, if you haven't visited Delaware County Historical Society in recent times, I really encourage you to come visit us and see us in our historic building here in Chester. It's a wow. And our collections make up three pillars which form the society: the museum gallery, the research library, and the education center. I also encourage you to visit the Sports Legends of Delaware County in Radnor. It's in the municipal building, and it's really an interesting place to go. Just a logistics note. Please save your questions until the end. You can put them in chat and we can pull them off chat and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. Okay, so I told you a little bit about our host, Rich Pagano, but Rich has his own long storied history of sports success and mentorship here in the county. He is a collector of sports history, with a library of over 8,000 books and 10,000 magazines, journals, and periodicals. Rich, I want to know, did you count all 10,000 of those?
You know, actually, I did at one time, yes.
He is a published author, has written several books, has written over 1,700 columns on sports personalities. He serves on the board of the prestigious International Society of Olympic Historians. And actually, before you all got on, he was sharing with Paul and I a little bit about his entry into the real history of sports, back to the start of the Olympics. He is a member of the Veteran Boxers Association, and he was inducted into the Delaware County Athletes Hall of Fame and was instrumental in establishing the Sports Legends of Delaware County Museum. So as you can see, Mr. Rich Pagano knows his sports history, and it is my pleasure to let him take the lead tonight. And here you go. Here's Rich.
Well, thank you, Lori. We're going to start out with Mickey Vernon, but I do want to mention, and in the research that I've done, the first baseball player and actually the first athlete we could find who also served in the military was Tom Berry from Leaperville. Now, Leaperville is what it was called years ago. It's actually Crumlin today. It's part of Ridley Township, a section of Ridley Township. But Tom Berry fought for the Union Army during the Civil War, and later, after the war, played for the Philadelphia Athletics for a couple of years. So I always like to mention him because baseball and sports for us in Delaware County actually go back to the Civil War. And I find that very interesting. But Mickey Vernon, one of our top athletes and baseball players, Mickey was born in Marcus Hook, and he attended Eddystone High School, which doesn't exist anymore. It was a consolidation between Eddystone High School, Ridley Township High School, and Ridley Park in 1966. They became Ridley High School that everyone knows about today. But Eddystone is kind of a part of that now. Everybody just refers to the area as Ridley and Ridley High School. But what was really interesting about going to Eddystone High School Mickey, there was no baseball team, so he couldn't play baseball for his high school team, but he did play basketball, and he was a pretty good basketball player. And he played for teams outside of the school. And when he graduated in 1936, he attended Villanova University, where he played baseball his freshman year. And college was not for him, the studying, going to classes, and he ended up leaving after 1 year. And was in 1937, he was signed by the St. Louis Browns, and he played a year or so in the Eastern Shore League. Now, this is minor league baseball. Even though he was signed by a major league team, a lot of times you don't immediately go up to the majors and start playing. So he was playing in the minors. And in 1939, the Browns sold him to the Washington Senators. Wow. And that year in 1939, he came up in July of 39 and began playing in the major leagues. Of course, the following year in 1940, he was back down again to the minors, where he played in Jersey City. And that was pretty common at the time. If you weren't playing real well, they would send you back to the minors to get some more experience, and they would bring you up again. So in 1941, he came up with the Washington Senators again, and he started from then on. And I thought it was interesting that first year, the last day of the season, the last game, he was batting .299, and he was hoping to maybe bat .300. And the third baseman on the other team, and I can't think of the team they were playing, but he said, listen, if you bunt the ball down third base, I'll hesitate a little bit, let you get the first and give you a hit, and you could end up being a 300 average hitter that year.
Wow.
But he didn't realize that he bunted the ball, and that worked out well, but the catcher didn't know the deal. Bill Dickey, he ran up and got the ball and threw him out at first. So it didn't happen. I think he ended up 298 or 299. And he just missed batting 300 that year. Now, in 1944, and Paul might want to talk a little bit about this, he joined the service, joined the Navy. And
yes.
Paul, go ahead, Paul.
So in October of 1943, he was essentially drafted. This was at a point in the war when the United States government and the Army were kind of just taking everyone that they could, and Mickey Vernon was no exception, even though he had, at this point, about a 4-year career in the MLB. And he was inducted into the Navy. He went to the Sampson Naval Training Station in New York, where he went through your basic boot camp, make sure he was physically fit for service and training. He was then stationed at Norfolk Naval Air Station, where he continued to play baseball. And what his main practice was in the Navy was he was brought on to teach recreational sports and to play games to boost morale for the Navy. So he took part in playing in the Navy's Western Pacific Tour, playing for the 5th Fleet team, and he would tour islands all around the South Pacific, such as Saipan and Guam. He helped to create recreational programs, specifically baseball and basketball, for naval members stationed in certain places so that they could have something to do. It was a good recreational sport. It kept them in shape, boosted their morale. He was also he was then discharged in October of 1945. So he missed 2 MLB seasons. And he served, even though he didn't see much fighting or anything, he served a pretty important purpose for, boosting morale, talking to troops, hanging out with them, and just kind of, using his star power to sell the war effort to people both at the war front and at home.
Yeah, what was interesting about that, when he did come back, he missed the 44 and 45 season.
Mm-hmm.
When he came back in 46, he won the batting title. He batted .353.
Wow.
So his first year back from World War II, he ended up winning the batting title in the American League, batting .353. A few years later, in '49, he was traded to the Cleveland Indians, and it was strange. And back in a year later, in '50, he was traded back to the Washington Senators. And in 1953, he won another batting title, batting .337, just beating out Al Rosen. And it was interesting because if Al Rosen had won the batting title, he would have won the Triple Crown that year. But Mickey beat him by just one point. So in '56, he got traded again to the Boston Red Sox, and he won what was interesting there, he played 2 years with Ted Williams, who many feel is one of the greatest hitters ever in Major League Baseball. And I remember Mickey telling me in an interview, he said, I never saw Ted Williams swing at a bad pitch. Never. In those 2 years that he played with him, which is quite an accomplishment, or quite a statement to make about someone. We can see guys on the Phillies, they swing at more bad pitches maybe in one time at bat. And here he's saying this guy didn't swing at a bad pitch in 2 years that he played with him. In 1958, he was back with the Cleveland Indians, and in 1959 with Milwaukee. But it was interesting what happened in 1960. His friend from Delaware County, Danny Murtaugh, at that time was the manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And Danny brought Mickey on board, and Mickey got a chance to have a few bats in 1960, which gave him one of few, I don't know if it's 4 or 5 people in Major League history that have played baseball in 4 decades. The 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and 60s.
Wow.
And not only that, he got a hit in every decade too. So it's quite an accomplishment. And if it wasn't for Danny Murtaugh, because after he had a few bats in 1960, Danny made him a coach. And of course, the Pirates won the World Series that year. And Mickey was part of that because he had never been in a World Series all those years, those 20 years that he played. He became, in 1961, it was a team, I guess a couple teams came into Major League Baseball. One was the Washington Senators, but a different Washington Senators. He became their first manager in 1961. This Washington Senators later became the Texas Rangers, because I remember they called Mickey up one time to come down and throw out the first pitch in the season. And I'm thinking, well, the Texas Rangers, he never played for them. Well, at one time they were in Washington and they were called the Senators. But he was let go in 1963. And he, at that time, managed a few minor league teams. And then he later became a hitting coach with the Dodgers, Montreal, the Yankees. He always said George Steinbrenner always paid him very well being a hitting coach with the Yankees. So he was actually in the major leagues, involved with baseball for 50 years.
Wow.
Mickey. And he barnstormed before Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. He barnstormed with a team that Bob Feller had, the Bob Feller All-Stars. They went against Satchel Paige All-Stars. Satchel Paige was a African-American pitcher who eventually got a chance to play in the major leagues. But for many years, he played in the Negro Leagues. And he always said that Mickey was so hard to get him out. Mickey always got hits on Satchel Paige. And Satchel Paige is one of the great pitchers of all time. I think I don't know if Paul mentioned it, but during the war, he was stationed with Larry Doby and Bill Goodman. But Larry Doby, when we had the statue unveiling down in Marcus Hook of Mickey Vernon's statue. If you haven't seen that, it's right there on the main street in Marcus Hook. Larry Doby's daughter came to the unveiling. It was very nice. She thought a lot of Mickey Vernon and his friendship with her father. He was quite a player. He led the league in doubles 3 times. He was on 7 all-star teams. He had a lot of fielding records for a first baseman, the most assists in a season, the most double plays in a career. He was Dwight Eisenhower's favorite baseball player.
Oh, wow.
Because if you play for the Senators, that's where the first game was, and you would throw out the president of the United States would always throw out the ball. And so one time, I guess it was in '53 when he won the batting title, Eisenhower gave him a silver bat for winning the batting title. He had 172 home runs, and people think that he wasn't much of a home run hitter, but he had the second most home runs by any player ever in Yankee Stadium. And Griffith Stadium, where he played, was voted the second toughest ballpark to hit a home run. So most of his career, he played with the Senators in Griffith Stadium. And I really think that's one of the main reasons why he didn't have that many home runs. Yeah, Mickey, there's a lot of arguments about Mickey should be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. He's not, but hopefully someday he will. I know he's been up for it, and he doesn't get enough votes. You have to get 75% of the vote. And but one of the great, I think I'll sum it up by what Bob Feller said about him, the great major league pitcher. He said, if you didn't like Mickey Vernon, you don't like anyone. And he was a great guy. I got to know him, one of the nicest people I've ever met. So,
well, let's hope that he gets into the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it would be great.
Next up, Paul, we have. All right, Rich, what do you know?
Yes. Next up, we have Emlen Tunnell, who was born in Bryn Mawr, raised in the Garrett Hill section of Radnor Township. Went to Radnor High School, was just an outstanding all-around athlete. He started he started in football as a freshman, as a 9th grader. He started on the high school varsity team. He was an all-state football player, all-state in basketball. Again, Radnor didn't have a baseball team either, but he did play some baseball for some local teams. When he graduated in 1942, he ended up at the University of Toledo and playing football. He ended up breaking his back. Of course, they say back. It was one of the vertebrae up closer really to the neck. And it was pretty bad. He was in the hospital, and there was a priest there that gave him his last rites. They didn't think he was going to live. And he came home wearing a neck brace, which he wore for months. But he did return to Toledo, didn't play football right away. He ended up playing basketball. And what was interesting, I don't think people realize how good of a basketball player was. He ended up playing in Madison Square Garden for Toledo in the finals of the National Invitational Tournament, which at that time was bigger than the NCAA tournament. They ended up losing the game, but he was a starter on the team and scored in double figures. Just an unbelievable athlete.
Let's see your T-shirt there, Rich.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I have when we had the statue dedication and unveiling back in 2018 up there in Radnor, we had these shirts made up, emulate Emlen, and I thought I'd wear that for this event we're doing. But what happened was he ended up going back and playing basketball, like I said, but then he had enlisted. He tried to enlist in the Navy, but they rejected him because of the injury he had on his back and neck. And but one branch of the service that did accept him was the Coast Guard. And Paul, you might want to interject some things here about his Coast Guard career.
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna have to skip.
Well,
ahead.
Before you do that, I did want to mention that he had never been on a boat before and he could barely swim, but now he found himself in the Coast Guard because he wanted to help. You know, he wanted to be involved in the war effort, and the Navy wouldn't take him, and I'm sure the Army wouldn't either. So he ended up in the Coast Guard.
Well, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rich.
No, that's okay. You're up.
Oh, well, yeah. So just a quick. So he joined the Coast Guard in 1943, and he at the time the service, all branches of the service, the Army, Navy, Coast Guard were still segregated by race. So the only position, typically the position that was reserved for Black Americans, was a steward's mate. So he was more or less a cook. He would clean with dishes and prepare food and stuff like that. However, that didn't stop him from being an incredible member of the service, because he survived a torpedo strike from a Japanese airplane while on the USS Emlen, and it's kind of an incredible story. When they were unloading fuel off the coast of Papua New Guinea, this was in April of 1944. They were unloading fuel and explosives from a cargo ship, and the torpedo struck the cargo ship. And one gentleman burst into flames because of the fuel, and he ran over with his bare hands and put him out, and even had suffered injuries himself, putting out this fellow crewmate who survived. It was an incredible rescue. And then in 1946, he was off the coast of Newfoundland in Canada, where they were stationed for a while. And he saw a crewmate fall into the ocean and dove in 32-degree water where, you know, you would immediately freeze to death. And he saved himself and this fellow crewmate. Really incredible bravery. And now, plus, Richard, you telling me about the fact he had a broken back and then joined the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
Incredible, like, just to think about. In 2011, he was posthumously recognized with the Silver Life-Saving Medal for heroism, a huge reward in the Coast Guard. And then I remember, Richard, we spoke about it earlier. So in December 2017 is when the boat, the USS 45th Sentinel class Emlen Tunnell, was commissioned. It was completed and christened in October 2021. And he also has a sports complex named after him. It's an athletic sports complex building named after him at the Coast Guard base camp. So he's widely regarded in the Coast Guard as an incredible individual, and as well as he should be, for such incredible feats of bravery.
Yeah, quite a hero. Now, after he got out of the service, he ended up at the University of Iowa, one of the Big Ten schools, and he ended up playing there football and had an outstanding season. But the following year, the coach there wanted him to just play defense. He still had one more year of eligibility, but also when he was there too, after football, I guess it was in the summer, he actually played minor league baseball for a team in Iowa. And as far as I can find out, he's the first African-American to ever play minor league baseball in the state of Iowa. So what he decided, since I do have another year of eligibility, they're not going to let me play offense and defense, because he was playing both sides of the ball. He was a running back. He was a defensive back. He said, I'm going to, he ended up hitchhiking home, but then he went out on the Lancaster Avenue and he was going to hitchhike. He ended up hitchhiking up to New York, to Manhattan, because he wanted to play for the New York Giants. Wow. And he ended up in Jersey. He couldn't get any rides there for it. Now, keep in mind, this is 1948. He's a black man in America, and he's out hitchhiking. So he starts out on Lancaster Avenue there in Delaware County. He gets into New Jersey and he gets picked up by a guy, a West Indian guy, driving a banana truck. And this guy takes him all the way up to New York, into Manhattan, very close to the Polo Grounds. And he ends up going over to the Giants office and talking to the owner, Tim Mara. It's an unbelievable story. And Tim Mara signed him for $5,000 for the year. And he became the first African-American to play for the New York Giants. He had a great first season his rookie year. He got harassed a bit. His sister had talked about that because she went up to the first game. But when they saw how good he was no longer harassed. Well, an interesting story, he got paid. He had a check from the Giants, and he went to cash it at a bank in New York, in Manhattan, and they wouldn't cash it because of him being African-American. Coming into the bank, they didn't know of any blacks that were playing for the Giants. And finally, the people at the office at the Giants had to call the bank and let them know that he's one of our players. You can cash his check. There's, because he had a lot of problems early on. Even when the team would go to various cities, there were places where he couldn't get served a meal. He had to eat somewhere else. He couldn't go in certain hotels. It was not good for blacks playing sports at that particular time. So he had a great career with the Giants. He ended up playing 14 years with the New York Giants. And he really, he was a safety, a defensive safety. And he really, he changed that whole position. It kind of, he was a defensive player to be thought of as an offensive threat. He had a lot of interceptions, 79 in his whole career, 79 interceptions. He was offense on defense. And the ship, the cutter that we'll be talking about that was named after him, that Paul had mentioned, on the ship, it says inside at a spot where all the crew can see it, offense on defense. That crew got a chance to come to our museum, get a picture at the statue. They really love the fact that this ship is called Emlen Tunnell. He also, in 1956, he helped the Giants win the NFL championship. And in 58, they were runners up. He was 9 times a Pro Bowler, played in the Pro Bowl 9 times. He actually, 8 straight years was in the Pro Bowl. He had 79. When he retired after 14 years, he had 79 interceptions. He led the league for a career in punt yardage. He played in 167 straight games. He only missed 1 game in his career. Vince Lombardi, who was one of the assistant coaches with the Giants, ended up leaving and going to Green Bay to take over the head job with the Green Bay Packers. And he wanted Emlen to go with him. So Emlen went with him, and Emlen always said, I doubled the amount of African Americans that were living in Green Bay. He only knew of one other one who was working at a hotel, which is the hotel that he stayed in. But Lombardi wanted him because of how great of a player he was, but also Lombardi was starting to draft and bring black players to Green Bay. And he thought Emlen would be a great help in getting them situated and learning the ropes there. Actually, in 61, his last year that he played, Green Bay won the NFL championship. In 62, he ended up getting married and ended up becoming a scout for the Giants and the Packers. He's the first African-American to be a scout. Then he became a full-time coach and first black in the NFL to become a full-time coach and scout. In '67, when he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, he became the first defensive player, the first African-American to get in, to be inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And it was funny, when he was inducted, he gave his talk. He thanked everybody, and he even at the end thanked the banana truck driver that got him to New York so he could meet the owner of the Giants. The NFL came out with their 100th anniversary team in 2020. He was on it. He's picked as the best safety in the history of the NFL, which started in 1920. So 2020 was their 20th anniversary. Then we had the statue unveiling in 2018, and then the Coast Guard cutter in 2021. Just an unbelievable career for this guy. The only problem was he died very, very young, and I think a lot of people forgot about him. He died in 1975. He was only 50 years old, still working as a scout and a coach with the Giants. And he left us way too soon, but we're trying to actually get the Giants to retire his number too. We have a statue now, Coast Guard cutter. He's got the gymnasium named after him out in California, like Paul said. But we would love to get a stamp in his honor, and hopefully those things can happen in the future. But
Well, Rich, it certainly seems like the Sports Legends of Delaware County Museum is working hard to make sure that we don't forget Emlen, and that we remember all the first that he achieved.
Exactly.
What a legend, sports legend, and a service hero he was.
Yeah.
So I can see why he was one of the 4 legends that you identified to highlight in tonight's program. Yeah. I wasn't aware of everything that he had done.
Yeah. There's the football and him as a person, but then the World War II hero. It's just an amazing career. And that was only in 50 years. I mean, he didn't live as long as we'd like him to have, but what are you going to do?
Well, you guys are doing a great job in keeping his memory and his legend alive.
Well, thank you.
Next up, we have, moving forward, I guess, in wars, we have Bill Carpenter.
Yeah, Bill Carpenter. Bill Carpenter, another one of these guys that multi-talented. He attended, grew up in Springfield, and his dad died when he was very young, but his dad was very much into the military, served in World War II. So Bill attended Springfield High School, where he was an unbelievable all-around athlete. He was an all-county running back, outstanding basketball player, a hurdler in track, but he did a lot more in track. He actually helped Springfield High School win the Delaware County track and field team championship in 1956. He ran the 100 yards in 9.9 seconds on a cinder track, which was unbelievable because he weighed he was 6'2" and weighed 200 pounds. He was a great hurdler. He long jumped over 21 feet. He just had it all. He was just a natural athlete. And in 1956, after he graduated from Springfield, he attended West Point. And at West Point, he again excelled in athletics, playing football. In 1958, he led the Army team to an undefeated season. They were ranked 3rd in the country. The coach was the legendary Red Blake. And what he had Bill Carpenter do, he became known as the Lonesome End. He never got in the huddle on offense. He would stay out on the end and never went into the huddle. And it was a very unique thing. It became nationally known, and they referred to him as the Lonesome End because, you know, he was lonesome out there. But in 1959, the following year, they elected him captain, and he was first team All-American in football. He actually got drafted by the Baltimore Colts, but he was really done playing football. And the military was so important to him. And I think a lot of it had to do with his father. And something I forgot to mention, he had never played lacrosse before. Not only that, he had never even seen a lacrosse game. And the first lacrosse game he ever saw, he played in at Army. Springfield didn't have a lacrosse team. Not many, well, hardly any high schools in Delaware County had lacrosse in the 50s. So he started playing for West Point for the Army lacrosse team. And within 1 year, he was an All-American in lacrosse and was voted as the top defenseman in the country. So that might show you a little bit about his talent as an athlete, as a natural athlete. But so what he did, he, instead of going with the Colts and maybe having a career playing football in the NFL, he went into the Army and ended up in Vietnam very early in 1963. I think he actually had 3 stints in Vietnam. And Paul, you might want to talk a little about what he did in Vietnam.
Well, just as incredible of an athlete he was as a soldier, it's just as equal. I mean, his service record is pretty unparalleled, I would say, to most people in this presentation. In 1964, he was assigned as an advisor to the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, which was the United States trying to train a local army, a local Vietnamese army. He has been awarded the Silver Star twice and the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the second highest award you can earn in the Army. Excuse me. Some really incredible feats of bravery. Specifically, one where a unit of his came under heavy fire, and immediately he had a. Or I'm sorry. Well, the first time he got the Silver Star was because when his company was under heavy fire, he took a hand grenade and threw it into a bunker, and that stopped the enemy fire. So he saved his company then. And while he was doing that, he had a gunshot wound through the arm. So he was able to take out the enemy fire and take fire while saving his company. He became Captain Carpenter eventually of C Company and was a part of the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, which is of the 101st Airborne Company. Of course, we all know who the 101st Airborne Company, they had major roles in World War II with Operation Market Garden and the Battle of the Bulge. And he got to be a part of this operation called Operation Hawthorne. And what happened was when this was somewhere in the middle of the country, just over the northern border slightly, their company became isolated and they were in danger of being overrun. They were essentially surrounded. And what he did in desperation, which seemed crazy at the time, but actually saved his company, was he called an airstrike on his own position. And I found this interesting story from a gentleman by the name of Brian Campbell. It was published in the Allegheny College of Maryland's Expressions magazines. And it was a series of stories of Vietnam veterans recounting their time and certain events that they had in the war. And this gentleman recalled about how Lieutenant Colonel Emerson, who served with Captain Carpenter in this Operation Hawthorne, recalled to him when he called in the airstrike, Lieutenant Colonel Emerson said, if this works and if I see you after this, I'm gonna recommend you for a Medal of Honor. To which Carpenter immediately and flatly replied, "Bullshit." He didn't care. He was just like, "No, this is gonna work. So let's just." Yeah, it seems like it proves Carpenter's character of somebody just like, let's get this done. Don't worry about medals right now. But however, so this airstrike of napalm came in. came dangerously close to his company. Some members of his company did get injured, but they all survived. And it was enough to blunt the attack so that they can retreat. And both Lieutenant Colonel Emerson and this gentleman, Ryan Campbell, who served in his company, all stated that without that airstrike, they would not be alive today. So he was certainly somebody who had a lot of guts to just forge right ahead. Yeah, and another incredible story was on February 1st, 1967, he was stationed right outside of an air base in Saigon called Tan Son Nhat. And an injured man, what happened was military transport crashed near the air base, and he ran out and was able to take a man from there and carry him to a C-123 provider military transport and rescue him without even, and apparently witnesses said that like he didn't even think, like he just immediately ran towards the crash and grabbed the gentleman and carried him right to safety. So an incredible, oh, and after all that too, he became an assistant to General Westmoreland. So he became pretty high up in the Vietnam War, highly decorated. And I believe now he retired from the military after being stationed in Korea for some time in the 80s. And he now resides in Montana, has a quiet life, but I mean, he really saw a lot of action, a lot of really incredible things.
Yeah, that was good, Paul. You covered that really well. Yeah, when I think of Billy Carpenter, he's what you call a soldier. I mean,
Very much so.
He didn't like all the, he called the officer, well, he referred to them as suits, you know. He said, I'd rather be out with my men than the soldiers in the field, you know.
If I recall correctly too, from my reading, was that after his gunshot wound the first time, he was the one who voluntarily went back. They didn't ask him back. He said, no, I'll do another tour.
Yes. Yeah. He was right at home being a soldier. And in fact, he was inducted into the Army Sports Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. He's also inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. And he lives kind of a recluse life. You're right, up in Montana. I think his wife passed away. He does have 3 children. But yeah, I don't know if I can compare anyone else from Delaware County in what he did in Vietnam. I mean, it's just, I think he could have, doesn't he have 3 stars? I believe he's a 3-star
is he a
general,
3?
right?
I only found out about 2. Is he a 3-star general? Or excuse me, 3?
Well, it's either 2 or 3, I believe.
Wow. Okay. I know he got 2 silver stars, which is 1 silver star is almost unheard of, and to have 2 is practically unheard of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so have all that with a Distinguished Service Cross. You're right next to a gold star there.
Well, he certainly sounds like a team player, both on the field and in the field, I guess, for sports.
Without a doubt.
And so again, another beloved Delaware County sports legend and service hero that we are recognizing tonight on Veterans Day 2021. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Rich. Next up, and I believe our last hero that we will be highlighting tonight is Bob Cru Bearsky.
Yes, Bob Kuberski, who graduated from Ridley High School in 1989. Another great all-around athlete. He was all league, all county, and all southeastern Pennsylvania in football. He played fullback and defensive end. He also wrestled at Ridley and played lacrosse. And when he graduated in 1989, he ended up at the Naval Academy. At the Naval Academy, he played football, and 2 times he was an all-East defensive end. He led the team in tackles for 2 years, and he was Navy. The Navy at the time did not have good football teams, but he was one of the outstanding players on those not so good teams. In 1993, he was drafted in the 7th round by the Green Bay Packers, and he was big, 6'4", 295 pounds.
Wow.
The problem is, though, when you're at one of the military academies, you have to serve with them first before you can play professionally. So for 2 years, he fulfilled his Navy commitment. Paul, did you have anything on his Navy, where he was stationed, or?
Yeah, so he served as what's called an ensign in the Navy. That's more or less an equivalent of a second lieutenant. So he came in as kind of a higher up officer into some respect. As to where he was stationed, I didn't find out a lot about that, but he was still very active in the Naval Academy. He's still the trustee of the Naval Academy Foundation. He was president of his class for 1993. Yeah, but it seemed like he, if I'm correct too, he only did, because the Navy negotiated for 5 years, but then they originally settled for 3 because he joined the Packers in '96.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, he only served with them 2 years.
2 years.
Because it was supposed to be 5. He worked out a deal, negotiated with them, where he would actually pay them.
And actually, as I remember too, is that during that time, the Packers still held him as a team member. They signed him anyway, correct?
Yes. Yes,
then,
they did sign him.
While he was with the Navy, actually, one of the things he would do was he would go and kind of do what Mickey Vernon did, which was, hey, here's a member of the Navy, but he's also a football player. And he would go and do talks. He would go do events for both the Navy and for the NFL. He would talk to people at crowds of games and stuff, and just talk about what they do in the Navy, or vice versa, what they do in the NFL at the Navy. So he worked as kind of an ambassador for both the Navy and the NFL at the same time during that time.
Yes. And when he did get back to playing with he did play with Green Bay for 4 years. He ended up in '97 winning a Super Bowl ring, but he didn't play in that Super Bowl because he was injured. But he was still on the active roster list, and everyone gets a ring. And even the following year, that Green Bay went back to the Super Bowl again, but they lost to Denver. And like he always said, I got a loser ring, and that's an NFC championship ring. They would even get, rings too. So after that, he was inducted into the Navy Sports Hall of Fame. He actually ended his career with the New England Patriots. So after his 4 years with Green Bay, he played 1 year for the Patriots and then retired. But he always talked about how he enjoyed that journey to the playing in the Super Bowl, or being at the Super Bowl with his teammates and bonding with his teammates and all. He just, of course, at the time felt pretty bad. He had a bad knee. I think he had surgery on it. And so he wasn't able to, but he did play in the Super Bowl in 1998. But they ended up, and it's funny, the fellow that beat them on the Brett Favre threw a interception to John Mobley, who was from Chichester High School in Delaware County. And he was a linebacker for the Denver Broncos, and they ended up beating Green Bay 31-24. But yeah, Bob Kuberski, as you were saying, didn't have a real long career, but he's one of the few from our county that ever went to the Naval Academy and played football there.
Yeah, and still very active with the Navy. Still is. He's on the board of the trustees, I believe, of the Naval Academy.
Yes. Yeah. So I didn't know, Lori, at this time, if we have time for questions.
Let's sort of recap here. So we're ending our highlights of our 4 sports legends and service heroes with Bob, who was a big man at 6'4" and almost 300 pounds, and lived a big life, doing a lot of great things, again, both sports-wise and service-wise. As you can see, Delaware County certainly bred a lot of sports legends and service heroes. We did not miss, we'd like to make a side note that we are aware that there was not a woman highlighted, and we hope in the future there will be. The Sports Legends of Delaware County Museum was not aware of one of the sports figures that they highlight, who also was serviced our country. So I'm sure that that will be in our presentation in following years. Any questions from the chat room, from our audience? Rich and Paul, I think you had a great virtual chemistry there and conversation talking about sports and about history, about our local sports legends and our local veteran heroes, and it's very fitting for today. Any questions? Well, I don't see any in my chat. Are you seeing any in your chat?
There's no one posting any questions in the chat?
No, I don't see any. No. Just a lot of really enjoyed this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you guys were very thorough. Again, thank you to the Sports Legends of Delaware County Museum for partnering with us on this project. They have been a great partner throughout the years with Delaware County Historical Society. And if you haven't visited either the Historical Society or the Sports Legends Museum recently or ever, please do so. Websites and addresses are on the screen. Both are nonprofit organizations that survive solely on the generosity of our residents and local businesses and foundations. So we encourage you to donate both your time and your treasure to both places. And thank you for joining us on this Veterans Day. And thank you to all of those who have served our country.